We are calling upon the new leadership of Parliament to establish a forensic audit process. Some of you may not be aware that the things that are in the public domain is just a tip of the iceberg. When Amin was overthrown, people knew, yes, that Amin was a murderer, but they actually did not know the extent of the murderousness. For those of you who love to read a book called The Dungeons of Nakasero. So today, in addition to asking Parliament to do oversight on itself, we ask, who watches the watchdogs? Parliament is a representative body. So you can rephrase the question I've posed. Does the Parliament speak the mind of the average Ugandan? If you were to go to the Hansard over the last 5 years of the 11th Parliament, are they really dealing with the real problems that face Ugandans? The Democratic Party believes that Parliament is out of touch with the life of the country. And that is perhaps due to a rusty process which is not representative. The Democratic Party will continue advocating for proportional representation for the Parliament of Uganda, so that the members who sit in Parliament will reflect the proportion of the citizens. The executive and its voice is most dominant in the work of Parliament. Parliament does not seem to be taking its fair share of the responsibility of governing Uganda. So it looks like instead of the Parliament being a crowd of 500 or so members, many of whom may not actually know what is going on. I'm sure many of you in the media had a taste of that when members of Parliament came from the caucus, having purportedly discussed the National Sovereignty Bill, and you started asking them about the real content of the bill, which they had agreed to support without question. And many of them proved to you in interviews that they actually knew nothing about the bill. It is not only the NRMs, even some members of the opposition who joined the NRM recently. I know one member who said he supports the bill in its entirety, only for the president to disown a huge part of the bill. So, the majority of the members of Parliament are just talkers and voters who are obedient to the government position. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with supporting the government position, but the government position should be taken after a process. We want the parliament to be a body of representatives which is informed. It should be a body of representatives which can help ministries. They should be supported by researchers so that they can give valuable advice. And they should have as much influence the way the executive has. The Democratic Party proposes that Parliament should be allowed to give an unfettered judgment on the details of every proposal that comes before the House. We would like a parliament which is efficient. We would like a parliament which restores the dignity and respect due to members, because that dignity and respect has been eroded over the years, and the greatest erosion occurred in the 11th Parliament. We don't just want MPs to talk, we want them also to work. We are calling upon the new leadership of the Parliament as they strive to clean the image of Parliament. We call upon them not just to focus on the image. The focus should be on the substance of what Parliament is set up to do. Our message is one: don't just look good, be good. We just don't want Parliament to hire public relation consultants so that Parliament's image start glittering. We are calling upon the new leadership of Parliament to establish a forensic audit process. Some of you may not be aware that the things that are in the public domain is just a tip of the iceberg. When Amin was overthrown, people knew, yes, that Amin was a murderer, but they actually did not know the extent of the murderousness. For those of you who love to read a book called The Dungeons of Nakasero. So today, in addition to asking Parliament to do oversight on itself, we ask, who watches the watchdogs? I think we have demonstrated that Parliament is incapable of exercising oversight over itself. We are even proposing that the Commission should have somebody who is not a member of Parliament to sit in the Commission, so that we have a hybrid process. For too long, we have played the ostrich game, burying our heads in the sand, while Parliament collapses under the weight of an intimidated civil service in the parliament. If you quietly interview the civil servants in the parliament, they'll tell you that now they can breathe. Only an inquiry will be able to establish who got jobs wrongly without being qualified, while those who are qualified are being bypassed. Those who are not qualified are being promoted. Nepotism was at its highest. A patronage system was set in place. I'm told many influential people got their children to get jobs in parliament in exchange for their loyalty. That it includes ministers, judges, all sorts of people. So, we call upon the new leadership of parliament to exercise vigilance so that we get to the root of the rot in parliament. You all know, like I said before, and I saw somebody wrote an article in the Monitor that Mao fought a fight which nobody wanted to fight. Everybody was dancing around the problem. It is like if you have a big snake and everybody is saying, there is a snake, and they are just making an alarm, but doing nothing. Civil society was making an alarm, MPs were making an alarm, the opposition leaders in parliament were making an alarm. But the problem was the position of speaker, because that's the position and office which was being abused. Someone needed to shake that chair. And that's the only contribution that I made. So we want to ask the new leadership, in addition, to protect the rights and privileges, particularly the freedom of speech of the members of parliament. The members of parliament are protected by law, and as they perform their duties, they need that freedom. In the 11th parliament, members of parliament were interrupted like in no other parliament that I know. You'll be shocked that if you went to the Hansard, you'll find that the presiding officer spoke more than the members of parliament. Yet speakers are not supposed to speak, in the same way that a referee does not kick the ball. But we had presiding officers who had a comment on every speech. It is not the duty of the speaker to color any submission. If the leader of opposition has stood up to speak, the presiding officer should immediately give a chance and a right of reply to the leader of government business. It is not, the presiding officer in parliament is not a judge. A presiding officer who asks somebody, what do you mean it's as if you are going to pass a judgment. That can only be perhaps if there is a point raised in accordance with the regulations. But you find a presiding officer who will be addressing the House on the substance of the bill. If you have not addressed it during your communication from the chair, why should you be commenting? If one side is too weak to defend its ideas, so be it. The voters should get wiser in the next election. So I am hoping that the new leadership will stick to that principle. In our letter to the new speaker, we are going to repeat the many points that we had raised earlier. You remember the points that we had raised? I can repeat them. That Parliament must be in session for a minimum of 120 days in a year. We found that on average, Parliament sits for 80 days out of the 365. Would you manage to pay rent if you worked for 80 days? I know sometimes they may be in committees and so on, but there must be a minimum. Number two, the calendar for Parliament must be set at the beginning by a multi-party committee of MPs. We must know what the priority business of the Parliament will be from the first sitting, which was yesterday, to the end of the session, which is going to be next May 2027. We are also asking that the rhetoric of a people-centered Parliament should be translated into reality. You cannot say you are going to drive a people-centered agenda for Parliament, and you are not inviting the public to suggest what should Parliament discuss. So the Democratic Party is proposing that special sessions should be held annually where the agenda of Parliament is based on public suggestions, focusing on key issues for debate and discussion. If the traders of Kampala want the issue of flooding to be discussed, Parliament should discuss that issue of flooding. And if need be, even set up an ad hoc committee. The rhetoric of data-driven debate, evidence-based debate, cannot work if you send MPs to collect evidence, then you block them from presenting it, the way it happened in the Uganda Airlines case. You want to take a decision based on evidence, and MPs go out and get evidence, then you say, please, we don't want to hear the evidence. Things are okay.